I'm so excited.
My first guest on the podcast. It's very exciting.
I mean, I'm a little obsessed with you in the most non-scary way possible. I'm just completely obsessed with you and your podcast. It's amazing.
Thanks. I remember you commenting on Instagram one time that was like, I think we're best friends and I'm kind of obsessed with you. And I was like, oh, that sounds fun. I want to know who that is.
Why does she live in Texas?
Yeah. Welcome, everyone. Hello. Yay! To a special bonus episode of Anti-Social Studies. It is AP History Teacher Edition. Woohoo!
Oh, yes.
So I have with me a fellow AP History teacher, Erin. I'll introduce her more in a second. And we've been doing some stuff on Instagram and just got so many good questions and comments and panicked thoughts about AP History and especially the new AP History world that's coming up that we just figured we'd do a full FAQ episode. And so to be clear, all of the information we talk about today will be useful for both AP World and AP US History teachers. So we both teach WHAP, but if you're an APUSH teacher, you can stick around. And then we got a lot of really good questions that were more focused on just like teaching in general, right? Like how to keep kids engaged in class or how to get kids to do their homework. And while those are fantastic questions, we just wanted to focus today on AP history specific stuff since that's where we're both experts, right?
Yes.
We're experts, yeah. Anyway, okay, cool. Without further ado, let me introduce Erin Provance. So tell us who you are and what you teach and all that good stuff.
Okay, hi. So thank you for having me on. I'm so excited. I am in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in a large urban district. It's the second largest district in Pennsylvania. I've been teaching AP World History. This is going to be my fourth year. My niche and probably what backs me up academically is more poli-sci and gov. But I fell into this class 4 years ago and I just completely fell in love with it. Fell in love with the humanities all over again. Actually just started back to school to get my master's in history, military history this summer. So really leaning into the work, but also kind of looking at College Board in a different way, not as a student of AP, but a teacher of AP, and figuring out what makes sense for students today, what helps them to really be students of history and little historians, and trying to instill this, I think, much needed reinvigoration into our field.
Yeah, I agree. And for me, when I went back and got my master's, it was like one of the best things for my teaching because totally what you're saying, like you go back to being a student and you're like in their shoes again. And I totally would reevaluate how I was doing things. And then I just think it's so powerful for students. Like I would intentionally bring in my work from grad school. So I would bring in my books and for them to see like, oh, people really do this. Like this is a random thing you're making us do. That's super powerful.
I have teacher assistants and I was at Panera Bread this morning at 9 a.m. reading, so much reading. And I snapped them a picture and I said, well, college is as hard as I remember it being.
Yeah, so that's so great. And I guess I'll introduce myself too, because some of my listeners probably already know me and then a lot probably don't. But so I'm Emily Glenkler. I teach in Austin, Texas. I'm going to my 9th year teaching and my fifth year teaching WHAP. And yeah, my degrees were in history and international studies. Like literally when I became a teacher, I was like, one day I hope to teach AP World History. And then I guess a lot of people don't want to do it because it's really freaking hard. And
yes, exactly. That's how I fell into it too.
Yeah, I was like, really? You're going to let me teach it? And so I was really excited to be able to teach it pretty early on in my career. And we'll go over this again. We talked about it in the Instagram Live, but I have taught all 4 years that I've taught AP World History have been at a large public school. So my class sizes were always 30 to 35. So for teachers out there listening, all the stuff I've developed and what I'm talking about doing, my experience is always in those massive class sizes. And I say that because I'm now at a new school that's very different and I'm super lucky. I'm at a new school where my biggest class is 15. But I don't want anyone to go look at the school I work at now, which is amazing, and think, oh, she has no idea what it's like to have 35 kids in your room, because I do.
Exactly.
And you're in a similar,
that's so important too. Yeah.
You're at a similar big public school, right?
That's right. So last year, my largest AP size when I started the year was 34. I had some trickle out when they kind of stuck around for a week.
Took that first test.
But I've never had a class under 23. So I'm always somewhere between 23 and 32, and I'm capped at 36. So I can't have more than 36. So same deal. And I think that's important too. And that's not to throw any shade at people who have smaller class sizes or teach at smaller or private schools. It's just to say, though, I think it's important to kind of know those attributes, which are everything that I've done is for a large public school with pretty large class sizes.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so we'll just start, I guess, with one of the first questions that we got, which I think is just a pretty good intro into both of our teaching styles, which is just like, what does a typical day for you look like in AP? What is a typical lesson?
So for me, I think this is true too of any class that you teach. But the class really is the same. The nuts and bolts stay the same. And my instructional strategies change. And I think that's what makes it feel like it's not so monotonous. So every day students come in, there's a word on the whiteboard, and it's always a content related vocab word to AP World. So it's either foundational or something that I've specifically chosen because I think it'll be great evidence for an LEQ or DBQ. And I want to just interject this because I think it's important because it's coming from the kids. At the end of the year, I give my kids a survey, and every year they say that the best thing that I did to help prepare them for the test during class was these words. Because they would sit there and think about it and, the typing rebellion, I can use this for that. So every day that word's on there, we stick it in a time period. So is this going to fit in time period 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4? We talk about that word. What's really great is as the year progresses, you see the kids sort of thinking about that word and what it might mean in a larger picture. And that's when the complexity comes in. So if we're doing the Boxer Rebellion, they might say, so how do you see this fitting into like a spice theme? Or how they'll get there themselves. I've seen them do that. So every day, with exception, unless there's a test or something, we come in and we do our word. Then we have class, which is, it'll start with me doing something like a direct instruction. It'll break out into small groups, and then we'll come back together as whole group. And that's every single day. It's just the instructional strategies will change, right? So it might be a movie clip, and then making a scene with Play-Doh, and then coming together and sharing our Play-Doh scenes. It might be me just doing a small direct instruction on mercantilism, and then breaking out into groups and spicing that up, and then coming together. So it's very much the same, whether it's gallery works, working with Play-Doh, putting on a presentation. The instructional strategies stay the same, but the class is very much monotonous if you think about it.
Yeah. I think that's great. It sounds like you're a lot more organized than I am. People are always like, oh, well, you have your basic structure. And I'm like, do I? I guess I don't. I think I do. I just don't think about it that intentionally. But when I had to for this question, it was actually really helpful because it does look similar to what you're saying. I always have up on the board, I typically try to phrase it as like an overarching question. And it might be for the day. It might be for the week. It might be for the whole unit. That we're always trying to answer. The way I kind of explain it is that I approach my classes like I want them to approach their essays. Like I'm going to tell them my thesis. I'm going to say, here's what's going on in this time period. And then I'm going to supply them through our lessons with tons of evidence to support that thing is happening in history. And so, yeah, it's the same sort of thing. I'll give some sort of direct instruction or let John Green or someone else give some form of direct instruction.
Absolutely.
And then, then we break out into groups where I try to look at, I would say my default lesson is document analysis, right? My default lesson is I just open up, find an old DBQ or find one of those resource books that has kind of documents ready to go. If I can find something like that, that's my default. And like you said, I might do it in different ways. I might do a gallery walk. I might do like a block party where each kid gets a different document and goes around and chats or whatever. But ultimately, it's like you look at your document alone, you figure it out with a small group, and then we put it all together as a class. Right. So yeah, it sounds like, similar. Obviously, we then have those super weird or random days where we do something out of the box. But it's good to have, I think, especially for new AP teachers, your go-to framework for a day, and that it's okay to be slightly monotonous in that first year, and just say, like, you know what, I'm gonna go over something, we're gonna analyze documents, we're gonna do a short SAQ, and then we're gonna come back the next day and do the same thing, right?
Right, because there's ways to, so documents on the surface, document analysis might sound like a huge snooze fest to non-history dorks like us, but there are things you can do that makes it at least seemingly exciting. Take documents, cut them up, put them in bags, and pass out the bags and say, okay, historians, let's dig through these bags, find the source that matches this claim. It adds just a level of excitement. Think of our own selves at PDs, and they're sitting there and they're talking. Imagine them going around saying, okay, here's a bag in your groups. That's what I'm saying. Like, the strategy can change, and you can just think of little things like that. Hide them around the room and make them go find it. Just little things that excite teenagers, first of all, teenagers.
Yes.
Sleepy teenagers. Get them excited about the learning and the discipline.
I swear, if you put something in an envelope, they will do anything. It's the weirdest thing of all time. But if I take like an activity we were going to do otherwise, like documents, and then I'm like, you know what, I'm going to put them in envelopes and tell them, like, don't open them for the first. They're like, ooh, and they're so excited. It's so weird. Yeah, so I totally agree. And like offline, if any, especially new teachers out there, if you're looking for a lot of those ideas, we can help you brainstorm them. But yeah, I mean, it's fine to do the same thing many, many different ways, right? Because really, ultimately, AP history is about just a few things, right? It's about reading and document analysis and writing, and that's all it really is.
Skills and content. How are you going to make it exciting?
Which leads us to our next question, which is that the biggest question that AP history teachers have, which is totally fair, is how are you supposed to cover all the content and all the skills, right? And even though the College Board has cut out a lot of our content, it's still an insane amount to try to cover in a year. Really, any one of these like key concepts could be an entire college course, right? And so the question is, right, we have these skills of historical reasoning and writing and argumentation and contextualization, blah, blah, blah. How do we incorporate those and teach all of the content? I think a lot of teachers think you have to sacrifice one for the other.
Right.
I think we both agree that you do not.
Right.
But tell me what your thoughts are on that.
So I think that was probably my biggest fear my first year going in, and I'm just going to lay this out. You have to kind of shed it a little bit. You are not going to get to the place that you want to get to, and that's okay, because at least historically anyway, College Board understands that, right? There are some people already back to school, and they're diving in the content. I mean, we don't go back for another 4 weeks. So historically, the end content hasn't been on the exam anyway. So rest a little easy with that. And you just go through, I think, the content and pull out what you want your kids to know. And here is 2 things I guess I want to give as advice. Number 1, you are not going to be able to teach these kids everything. If they do not do the work on their own outside of class, they will never reach full potential for the AP course. And it's a college level class. I mean, it is to prepare them for that, and they are getting a college credit. And in college, you would never enter a professor's class and think, everything I get, I'll get comprehensively here. That's just not plausible, right? So they're 15, and they usually learn that lesson a little late, which I think is part of the argument for having them to register for the exam early, which is, okay, I'm registered for this thing, so let me get into this work. But you just have to keep reiterating that to them. Find a group and outside of class that you're going to lean into this work with when you can. And the second thing about content is, I guess, more just anecdotal, or my desire to constantly try and be culturally responsive, is just beware of your implicit bias in the students as well. I think you'll find, at least what I found, I'll keep it immediate and local, is that if I ask kids, so maritime exploration, right? You're not going to cover all of those explorers in class. If you ask them to pick from a list of explorers, you're going to get a lot of presentations on Christopher Columbus, right? So just, you may have to make sure that you're saying, okay, you're doing Zheng-He and pick from this list, right? You're all researching Ibn Battuta, but go ahead and pick from Marco Polo. And I saw Marjorie Kemp did you see that? And I'm for it.
A lady explorer. I was
a
like,
lady explorer. All right, College Board. So I think that's my two biggest pieces of advice, which is you have to talk to the kids about doing work outside the class, and also as you're going through the illustrative examples, just be aware of the implicit bias you might have.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point to bring up, because I know that a lot of teachers, it's a cycle, right? I think a lot of teachers, clearly, you want to teach the things you feel confident in. And I know I experienced this when I started off teaching world history. Growing up, I didn't learn about African history. I didn't really learn about Chinese history. I definitely didn't learn about Southeast Asian history. And so my first year or two teaching world history, it was basically a Western Civ class, right?
Yeah.
And we've all been there, I think, or a lot of us have been there. But yeah, it's that effort to, and I think the College Board has done a surprisingly good job of not making this new course be totally Eurocentric. Because I think when we all heard it starting in 1200, that's what we thought. Mm-hmm. And I actually feel like it's more diverse than the old one was, because you can go into everything in more depth. So I totally agree. I think if you're, and that's where I would say, like, really pay attention to the key concepts that they emphasize, because I think you'll be surprised. Like, for example, the French Revolution isn't in there. Now, the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen is, and of course you're going to mention it, but like you might not actually, I know we probably, a lot of us have fun week-long simulations on the French Revolution, but like, can't we switch that to be about Haiti or to, to be about something else? And so I think that's really important. And second, I second what you're saying about kids have to do work at home to be ready for the AP test. Now, I know there are a lot of teachers out there who are like, well, kids just get thrown into my room and I can't be home with them, making them do their work. Okay, but just know that there's a difference between teaching them world history and teaching them the skills, which we can all do, and then preparing them to earn a 3, 4, or 5 on the test. And really, if kids aren't doing some of that work on their own, that's just going to be very difficult. For anyone listening that this is helpful for, I kind of like to think in my head that I spread my class, the content out. So around 25% of the content is covered exclusively at home, meaning I'm like, well, they read about it, they have it in their notes, let's move on. Mm-hmm. About 25% is stuff that I'm bringing in specifically. So either I'll say, you know what, the chapter is really confusingly written, I'm just going to go over this in my own words instead, or it's bringing in illustrative examples. And then there's that 50% in the middle that's super, super important, that's getting double covered. That's like, you read about it and we're going to explicitly talk about it in class. Right. But yeah, if you're one of those teachers who's like, well, I don't trust that they did any reading at home, so I'm going to go over everything they read in class, then yeah, you're not going to have time to get through everything. So I think you do have to figure out your strategy there for sure.
Right. I mean, they are 15 and it's not quite a college class, but I think you find what I found too, and let me just add this caveat. At my school, we do not even have an honors program in social studies. So my students are either taking mainstream or they're taking AP. So this is not a situation where I have lots of kids who are in the class because they want the college credit. It's lots of kids who were on an honors program path, but got shoved into AP because they got rid of it. So I hear you. And I know that not all of them do their workout. I never always did my work outside, right? I wasn't a perfect student. You have to outlast them. And I know just to veer off the AP course, to just get a little pedagogical, the things that matter to you, outlast them. So whether he or she ever reads the book outside of class, just outlast that expectation. Do not give up that that's the expectation, whether they ever do it or not.
Mm-hmm. I think that's really good advice. And I think for me, the approach I've taken is, and that's something where that's kind of why I created this podcast to begin with, was I think that also if we can teach the narrative to the kids, then that's going to stick with them. So I found that if nothing else, it's like they'll remember the big picture story of world history. Mm-hmm. I think that a lot of teachers just jump from one topic to the next. I know I did, where I was like, today we're talking about mercantilism, and then tomorrow we're talking about slavery, and then tomorrow we're talking about, and I was never stopping to be like, wait, what do these things have to do with each other, and why are we talking about these things? Right. So that's where I found that I can, if I slow down a little bit and go over the narrative, like I do big unit intros, I call them my spoiler alert day, where I'm like, I'm going to tell you everything that's about to happen. And I kind of slow down on the big picture, and really the College Board is giving you those things now and those key concepts and developments. Then you can really quickly, like you're saying, throw illustrative examples at them and say, for example, camels and lateen sails and stirrups or whatever. And really you can spend your time diving deep into the big narrative, which is also gets to the other part of this question, how you can then cover the skills.
Exactly. That's exactly where I'm going. Yep.
Right? So if you can cover the narrative, so the big picture narrative of the new Unit 4 in world history is like, okay, all these land-based empires have been doing things in a very old school traditional way, and now there's this new thing coming up, which is maritime empires. What's going to happen?
Right.
And that's your big narrative in question. Then everything they learn and everything they read at home should serve that question, right? And that's where then I at least formulate my entire course around the skills. So I will form it like by just the questions I'm asking, even just the way I'm designing a unit. I'm like, oh, this unit is just tailor made for comparison.
Yep.
Exactly.
Great.
And then that's sort of the main focus that we're then doing. Our lessons are like our evidence to prove what are they doing in similar ways, how are people responding differently, that sort of thing. What do you think about just incorporating skills in a way that feels meaningful?
Yeah, I mean, as you talk about how to introduce and execute teaching content, it really isn't a mutually exclusive relationship. They are bound together and married, the content with the skills. Now, at first, I think it's completely I think it's a great idea to teach them separately at first, right? Here are the skills. This is what the skills are. And here's what we're looking at in terms of content. And the thing is they don't always have to know what's on our mind, right? Because we're the professionals in the room, we're the masters of our field. So you can just start to infuse it. So, okay, get out your books. We're reading chapter 4 in Strayer's about religion. That's where we're starting my Unit 0 at. So my intent is to talk about content to go through, have them spice it out. Where do you see social things with the religions? Where do you see the cultural interactions or exchanges? Then do the same thing with skills. And I do an activity, it's called skill building, where the students get index cards and they get tape. And that's all they're allowed to have, and scissors. And in their groups, they have 35 minutes to go through a chapter, and they write the skill and where they see the historian talking about the skill. So they'll write change over time, and on the back, Strayer uses change over time when he talks about the Portuguese transforming the Indian, right? And then they have to make a building out of it. And then at the end of the class, I go around and shake the buildings, and the buildings have to withstand me. So again, it's teaching the skill. It's adding something in there that is at least seemingly fun to them, which is creating this tactile structure. But you infuse the skills into the content all the time.
Yeah, that sounds awesome, by the way, that lesson specifically. I agree. I teach the 4 C's explicitly.
Yes.
Sometime in the first half of the first semester, where I will sit the kids down and be like, how do you compare 2 things? And they're like, yeah. Oh my God, we know how to compare 2 things. I'm like, no, you don't. You don't know how to do it at the AP level. And so I'll have them say, compare me with another teacher at school or whatever. And, like I saw you kind of mentioning the same thing earlier, like, pick some silly example, compare these 2, music artists, whatever. That's where I then become very old and I have no idea who they're talking about. But,
compare Kenny Loggins to
Spice Girls and Backstreet Boys. But you start with that and just really get, you teach the skill on its own. And then you say, okay, well, now that we've figured out how to do that, how do you explain why 2 things are similar or why 2 things are different? Now we can move in and do it with the content, but that doesn't take very long, right? You do that as a quick intro. And then kind of like what you were saying with the skill building, I have them take notes in kind of a Cornell style. So ultimately they can take their notes however they want, but it just has to be that they're leaving space on one side for adding on notes later or adding questions. And one of the things that I have them use that for is they annotate their notes with like CC for compare and contrast, CE for cause and effect, CCOT or context. And it's the same thing. It was when we used Ethel Wood, I was like, whenever you see Ethel comparing 2 things, mark that in your notes and say, oh, she just said one major similarity was. And so I agree. It's like anything we're reading, any article we read in class, when we watch John Green, I stop him and I say, he just talked about change over time.
Yeah.
So yeah, I totally agree. It's already there. It's just a matter of you being on the lookout for it, and then eventually trying to get the kids to be on the lookout for it.
Right.
Right. It's make it easier on yourself if eventually you're like, oh, I'll give candy to anyone who can point out to me, right? And then they start noticing at times that I wasn't even intending to use it in that way.
I think that's right, and it comes with experience. So the John Green, I love John Green, by the way. And if you're looking for free resources, I like the Khan Academy, and I like John Green for lectures where I'm like, listen, the Khan Academy knows so much more information about this, so we're going to watch 10 minutes of this. But John Green does that. He presents his topic, he provides contextualization, he makes a claim, right? The Renaissance, in fact, is not a big deal because it only stays in the elite class. So, and he makes this claim and then he gives evidence. Once you point that out to the students, they start to see it. Now, the important stuff is what happens after. So when you're talking about that video, and what I found was when I changed my language, I really think it helped with the kids' success on the AP, which is when they start talking about it, when they start saying, well, what he said was that socially the elite classes, and then someone would say, yeah, but the culture. I would then say, wow, what a complex thought. Do you see how you just added layers of nuance just to kind of point to that unicorn point? And they're not all going to get there, but when you're pointing it out to them, point it out to them when you see it, I think it really helps.
Yeah, I agree totally. Using that language, and using the language of, like, the next question we have is all about the writing, right? Using the language of the writing and pointing out that, like, hey, y'all I actually have kids, and I had a coworker who I kind of built my AP World History class with. Hey, Emily, I'm sure she's watching. That she would, I think, have kids like yell out, I think, complexity or something like that. Like,
Oh,
whenever
I love that.
see it, they'd be like, or maybe she would shout it at them, but when they would say something like that, she'd be like, complexity, and she would like throw candy at them, right? So it's a matter of getting them to start using that language and really pointing it out when it's done well. So yeah, the other, that was one of the big questions. The other big question was, how do you teach the writing? Which this is really, I mean, all the AP history classes are now aligned, so all the writing is the same, which is amazing. I don't know why they didn't do that sooner. So first, you've been an AP reader for how many years?
Last year was my first year.
Oh, this is your first year. Okay, so tell me about that experience and what you learned there.
Yeah, I really, really hope that you can do it next year.
I really don't want to, but I will.
It's the best PD you've ever been to in your life. I mean, truly. I remember the second I sat down and they started explaining things, I was like, I've been teaching it wrong. Even though my kids did amazing and I had 21 kids get a 5 this year, I thought there is such a better way for me to do this. It's just it's the professional development, it's the like-mindedness, and I mean, it's super hard. And College Board is so super secretive. Here's, I think, my biggest advice in terms of writing. Number 1, chunk it out. Do not have kids writing LEQs full stop on the 3rd week of school. My kids don't even do a DBQ until the 2nd semester. They can't write a DBQ and they can't contextualize and they can't provide evidence for things they don't know yet. So there's just a certain amount of content you need to have to support LEQ and DBQ writing. So I do my first LEQ in November and I do my first DBQ in January, and you need to chunk it out. So I can't even tell you, I've lost count. If I said 30, I'm probably lying. It's probably 70 times my kids wrote thesis statements with contextualization. I just pounded them on that, and the scores really supported that work. I abandoned this idea that they have to try and that last chunk of DBQ and LEQ, the analysis portion where the unicorn point sits, it's really hard to get. It's just really hard to get. So yes, I think you need to help your kids learn how to source documents. I don't think you should abandon that completely, but when we're talking about the reality of what your 10th grade students are going to write, to me, I just really sat into that contextualization the thesis points, the 3 evidence points for the DBQ. That's what we really, really worked on. And the sourcing, I worked a little bit on, but we just didn't really get there. And from what I scored, no one really does. I want to say less than 0.4% of my students got those happy points on the DBQ.
Yeah, and that totally backs up what we've been doing too, which is, yeah, I've started making my rubrics to where those last points are on the back page. And honestly, the first time I introduce it, I might not even show it to them. I might just print it one-sided. So for the LEQ, right, it's like context, thesis, evidence. Am I missing something? Yeah, context, thesis, evidence.
Yeah, so for the evidence for the DBQ, you need to basically just have knowledge of 3 documents. Can you talk about 3 documents and be kind of right? That second point, that's where you need to use 6 documents that support an argument. And there's words you can use. Look, College Board doesn't want teachers to be too formulaic about their writing, right? You're just trying to create writers, but they're a little elusive, which I think pushes teachers to be formulaic, right? So there are some words that scorers look for to say like, and for this reason, right? That's getting them that extra point. And then there's the outside evidence, and that has to be about the prompt. So just make sure when you're teaching your kids contextualization and outside evidence, it needs to be about the prompt example. Exactly. If it's Portugal in the Indian Ocean Trade Network, they want outside evidence for that prompt, not about maritime exploration or anything else. They're talking about that specifically. That's where a lot of kids went a little skewed.
Yeah. Well, and what I always did is I always coach my kids when we're getting closer to AP prep time with that sourcing point, which I agree. I think as far as on the test is not worth it. I don't think it's worth the amount of work a kid would have to put in to accurately source like 3 or 4 documents. I just don't think it's worth it when you could spend that time on like one piece of outside evidence and make it really good. But what I do tell kids that want to try it is I say, when in doubt, pick historical context, the historical situation of a document. Because then I'm like, worst case, even if you don't get that quite right, it might actually end up being more general context for the essay, right? So, but I agree with you completely. I think scaffolding that writing is super important, right? So the way that I introduce it is we, from the very beginning, are doing short answer questions and just general document analysis, not tied to writing at all. So we're looking at documents from day one, and we're writing quick 2-3 sentence answers to things. And then we build up. So the way I do it is, in the middle of the fall, we do a full LEQ workshop, which means for me, it's almost like a week. We take like a week. And what I do is I pick some topic that to me is something they may already be mildly familiar with, like exploration. And I say, okay, we're going to cover this content through a workshop. So again, that's like doing double duty. I'm not stopping what I'm teaching, but I'm picking a topic that they maybe are already sort of familiar with. And we do a full week where it's like we outline together. They go home and write a rough draft. They come in and can peer score, and that's how I teach them the rubric. Then they can go home and finish. They come in and I do essay conferences. I mean, it is like so slow. And I do the same thing for the DBQ, either at the end of the fall or, like you said, the beginning of the spring, depending on where my kids are at. And going slow in the fall on writing, I think makes it to where then in the spring I can go fast. I can say, okay, now I think we really understand, again, the basics, how to write a good thesis, good context, good evidence. And then you can just go. And in the spring, I do sort of rapid fire. My strategy in the spring is to demystify essay writing. So there's this panic, right? If you think about that, if every time your kid is writing an essay, it's for a major grade, then that's terrifying, right? Yeah. But if instead you're saying, no, well, we're going to write this essay and then I'm just going to look at it and give you all 100 for a daily grade. Or sometimes we're going to take it and we're going to peer score and then I'm just going to, I'll make it a quiz grade if y'all did well. Like you can take things and have them write it in a way that's lowering the stakes, not making it so nerve-wracking for them.
Right.
And then what happens is that in the spring, they should be peaking by May. So it's like you're slowly ramping up because, if you start them writing a full LEQ in September, they're going to want to die by May.
It's not going to be helpful. And here's the thing. Here's the bottom line. The AP exam, to pass, you need like a 60%. Right? So right now, I think last year kind of sat around getting around 50% on the multiple choice was around the 3 mark, which is passing. And in my opinion, that's how your course should be curved if you're doing AP College Board material, right? So if I'm giving you AP Docs and I'm asking you to write a DBQ and you only have to get a 4 on the DBQ to do well on the AP, then guess what? A 4 is going to be 100% in my class. That's how you get them to calm down about the class grade and think about, the learning and not get so caught up in, but this is going to ruin my chance to be valedictorian.
Right.
Yeah.
Which was actually one of the questions we had kind of at the end, was about, and we'll lovingly call them grade grubbers, right? But but yeah, I mean, you do get a lot of those kids and parents that are just like, well, but I need the GPA boost and I can't get below an A. First, I just tell them, well, they're gonna have to earn an A. This might be the first social studies class where they have to really work to earn that A. But yeah. I totally agree. I do think that sometimes teachers go in, and I didn't think about it at first, my first year teaching AP. And if you're just used to scoring things and saying like, well, they got a 70, I guess they got a 70, but no, like I give big curves on those tests, because to me, there's value in them seeing that full difficult AP style multiple choice from the beginning, but then knowing that like it's not going to destroy their grade. So yeah, I think that's super smart.
Yeah, I actually have I figured out a basic of what the curve would be, and I just laminated it. So I know that if they're taking a 20-point multiple choice test, this amount is actually this on an AP curve. So I have that, and anyone can reach out to me through Instagram or through my Instagram handle and my Gmail account. But having something like that alleviates a lot of stress. So, and chunk it. Don't be afraid to talk about content and then say to the kids, what kind of documents would you need to support this? So to chunk it out and also have them memorize it. I mean, they do get the basic idea of the rubric on the AP exam, but really talk about that rubric. Invite them up for lunch. Stay after school for 10 minutes if you can. Say, we're going to talk about this DB. Let's just talk about the rubric. Let's understand what the rubric means. That's so important. I think last year by November, I still had kids not knowing the subcategories of the spice. So I'm like up on the wall ripping. I'm like, no more anchor charts. You got to know this. You're going to sit there and they're going to say social, and you're going to go, oh crap, what was under social? There is a benefit to basic memorization of some things.
Yeah, I agree. I think getting them to see that rubric, not from the very beginning, that rubric is terrifying at the very beginning, but easing them into it. Right. And then something that I actually learned, one of the questions about writing that a lot of teachers were asking was, how do you grade all the writing? Because it's a lot. And I know for me, every year up until this upcoming year, and when I give an essay, that means I have 150 essays to grade, right? And I learned something that has been maybe my best teaching practice from he's now our head football coach. So he was, and this is Texas football, so I don't know how familiar you are, but like if you've seen Friday Night Lights, it's like it's real. Friday Night, there were like, some of our football coaches were in Friday Night Lights in the background. And he was like the defensive coordinator of the football team and teaching AP World, and he was teaching it really well. And he was like, I just don't have time. He's like, I don't have time to go home and grade essays. So he did essay conferences in class. So what he would do, and what I've copied from him, is like after that first LEQ workshop, for example, I'm planning like a 2 or 3 day lesson that is mostly student led. I think it's gonna be like some sort of web quest type of thing. And then I'm going to call each kid up to my desk, and I'm going to sit down with them. And this is the key that you might need to work up to. But I don't look at their essay until they're sitting next to me, right? So this is not double duty. This is not I'm going home and grading it and now I have to explain it to them. But that's kind of nice too, because then you have to write that paragraph long note. You can just tell them. In which case I sometimes use like the recording function on Google Classroom or our gradebook, where I'll just record my thoughts real quick. But what I do is I sit down and then I pull up their essay and read through it for the first time, and I grade it right there in front of them. It's terrifying for the kids, which I kind of like. And then but it's so, one, it saves time because now I'm getting grading done in class, but I don't feel like I'm being like a bad teacher because I'm giving them one-on-one feedback. And second, the kids get to see immediately what we mean when I say like good evidence, because I'll just kind of talk out loud and go, oh, that was so close, but like you didn't tell me anything super specific. And if you'd said this instead, so I can kind of talk them through it and they see how I grade it and they see how I mark the rubric. And all of a sudden, after one of those, they're like, I get it now. It makes so much more sense.
Right.
To be clear, for any teachers looking to do that, I only do that the first time. So the first time they write an LEQ, I do in-class conferences, and the first time they write a DBQ. And then after that, anytime they write one, I make it optional that they can sign up for one. What's nice, and I noticed that you wrote on your notes, like, as you're getting close to the AP test, right, you really do want to pay attention, like, some kids want more feedback than others. Some kids are not taking that class to get a 5 on the AP test. And that does not mean you don't pay attention to them, but that also doesn't mean you break your arm writing them 10 paragraphs on their LEQ. And so if you start to notice, those kids that they're like, I know they're going for a 4 or a 5, well, they're going to be the ones signing up for those essay conferences. And so what that means is that then I know, like, man, I need to really spend a lot of time on this and give them really valuable feedback. And then the other ones, I'm still giving my normal feedback that's written that, frankly, a lot of kids aren't even looking at. But it just helps me also kind of not prioritize which kids I'm paying attention to, but prioritize how much feedback on essays I'm giving.
It's differentiated instruction. I mean, that's exactly what it is. So to your point, number one, and again, at the risk of being too formulaic, if you're short on time, have the kids write an essay and have them put where they think they're getting context. Yes. So have them write context, thesis, evidence, outside evidence, right? Have them label it. Tell them not to do that on the AP. Okay, readers are professionals who don't need it. But for you can go, because then you're going, so where did you think you got the context? Have them label where they think they got it. And that way you can have that dialogue with them, right? And then the second thing is and just my little plug to get Emily Glankler at Kansas City next year is I can basically read a DBQ now in under 2 minutes. So going to the reading supports, I mean, before, when I started the reading, I was just going through, by the end of that week, I was really reading an essay in 2 minutes. So going to the readings, and I would encourage anyone who's listening, and teachers, I think they want you to teach around 3 years of the course to get out of your comfort zone a little bit and do that. That I know is going to help substantially. And then the third thing to your, so the last point was, it is just differentiated instruction. So it's not, I'm going to pay more attention to you, but here's the deal. Here's the bottom line for teachers who are here for the AP, for the exam. When you start giving your students the multiple choice tests and you start to see early that kids who are around the 80% range, kids who are getting about 80% right, those are your 4s. Those are your 4s and 5s. The kids who are performing at the 3 range are going to be around your 50 and 60. And if you see kids staying pretty much in that lane as the year progresses and you're doing tutoring sessions, differentiate the instruction. Look, you got to pass the multiple choice to get a 3 on the exam. So if those are the kids who are around the 50 or 60% mark, have them focus a lot on multiple choice during your sessions. Those other kids, it's really about the DBQ and LEQ. And I saw that last year and I thought I had 8 kids get a 5 and I thought it's that LEQ, because it really takes fortitude to get through that LEQ. And I know that if I lean into this LEQ work with them this year, those kids who are already, they got the multiple choice. And that's what I did. And I think that's where we found a lot of success, differentiated instruction.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think you just reminded me, one last point on this writing before we'll move on is I did my last year teaching AP, I started having them score themselves before they turned it in. And it was really eye-opening and helpful. So I did the same thing. I had them, they had the rubric next to them and then they would staple it on front and they would score themselves. Mm-hmm. And not, that doesn't mean that if they said they didn't get the context point, that doesn't mean I didn't still look for context. Yeah. But honestly, I didn't then go dig for it, right? Because I feel like I, as a teacher, I always think that, like, man, they were going for every single point and I'm going to try my best to find it. But there's some kids that are like, I didn't try to do sourcing. And I'm like, oh, great. Then I just won't look, I won't worry about it, right? So I think and it's helpful for them. It gets them used to the rubric. Also, I've found that it really encourages a growth mindset, right? This idea that like, if they really look and they say, okay, I think it's fair that I got a 4 on this essay, then I just think that's better than them just randomly turning in an essay and not really evaluating themselves at all. And then a lot of times if they got a 5, they're like super proud and excited. Whereas otherwise, if they just saw it in the gradebook as a 5 out of 7 or whatever, they would have been bummed. So yeah, I think that's all great. Okay, so that was, I think, the writing. Was there anything else you wanted to add about teaching writing?
No, I think, and again, I just want to reiterate, I don't, the course should be a course that all students should feel really proud about at the end of the year. And as a teacher, you can differentiate instruction like a lot of things, and I have to say, so I'm differentiating instructions because I think you can get a 5. Don't do that, right? They don't need to know the things that are going on in your head. But if we're just talking specifically about the exam, that's what I found to be helpful. But just infusing it in, chunking it out, I think are just really great tips to make sure kids are writing.
Yeah, and don't feel like your kids don't have to write a full essay or full DBQ to get it, right? I mean, you can have them write one paragraph of a DBQ, and in that paragraph, you can tell whether or not they get it or not. I have them write a lot of outlines too, where like you're saying, they have to write their contextualization and thesis, and then they just outline for me what they would write about. And from that, I'm like, yeah, this would have been a pretty solid essay. So there are a lot of tricks that you can do. I think for new teachers like me coming in, I felt like I needed to be giving them an essay constantly, and then I was dying. And so I think that's super helpful.
Yeah. And this is just an alert too for all of our colleagues who maybe are students of history from years ago. I'm in a master's program now, and there isn't one multiple choice test. I'm not saying that traditional colleges aren't or universities aren't giving multiple, but it's writing. When you are a historian and when you are a student of history, you are being asked to write. So if you are not having your kids write in some capacity, in whatever way you can push them, you're really doing a disservice to them in the field, because that is what the field and universities are now using as their main source of assessment.
Yeah, I think I got a really good question from a middle school teacher that was asking like, what can non-AP teachers do, either pre-AP or middle school teachers do to help prepare their kids? And to me, it's like, it's writing. It's getting the kids writing. And to me, I worked a lot with my freshman teachers, and we sort of tried to vertically align as much as we could. And what I told them was, if they leave your class after freshman year and can write a really good paragraph, I'm ecstatic. Like if they walk into me and they can write a solid topic sentence, 1 to 2 pieces of evidence, and then clearly explain how that evidence answers the question, I'm like, oh, we're good. I got this now, because I can take it from there. So if you're listening and you don't teach AP, maybe you teach freshman world geography or whatever, you teach middle school, getting your kids looking at documents, and then getting your kids writing, even if that's just writing a good sentence and then writing a good paragraph. Like you don't need to give your 7th graders DBQs, but that is super helpful.
Yeah, agreed.
So, okay, some of the miscellaneous, we already covered 2 of the 3 actually. So the third one is about integrating technology into the class. I'll be honest, I'm not great at it. For me, in terms of integrating technology, we have Google Classroom. I post everything there. We actually take our quizzes online, which the kids like because they get immediate feedback. That's tricky in a big school if you have 6 sections and you're worried about kids sharing the answers. So I know that's an issue, but I use it for that. And I sometimes have them when we're writing SAQs, I will have them sometimes write it on like some sort of collaborative board, right? There's fancier ones, but Google Classroom, you can just have a discussion and each person replies so that everyone can see what everyone else wrote. Obviously, that's only once you've developed that classroom culture where the kids won't feel embarrassed or something with other people looking at their writing. But honestly, I'm like a little old school of a history teacher in that, like you're saying, a lot of it's just like reading and writing. And so I don't know that I get super fancy with technology in the classroom, but what about you?
If you are old school, your girl is ancient school, because number one, I'm 40. So my first college experience, we didn't even like computer class for me was literally playing the Oregon Trail, right? So I'm a 90s kid and it really was just something that was coming up. Now, couple that with the fact that I work at a school where in the last 3 years, we just got phones in our room. Okay. I have one whiteboard and chalkboard still. So I don't have the technology. We have one iPad cart that we share amongst a department. We have 3 computer labs in the entire school with 1,500 kids. So I think you get what I'm saying. I guess this is what I want to say. We're all met with these obstacles, right? It's public education. It's, next to transportation, the largest infrastructure in the United States. It's an imperfect system that we're constantly being thrown at things and being asked to fix problems that education can't fix. Try not to live in that space, right? I don't have technology in abundance at my school. What I do have, I'll try and use. So when I can get the iPad carts, we will do web quests or I'll do gallery walks with iPad. So use what you can. And if technology, I mean, it's not going away, right? They just added as a new category. So if the College Board says it's not going away, Emily, it's not going away. No, but so it's here. So you got to reach out. If you're watching this or you're listening to this, it's because you're trying to be better, hopefully, or you're trying to learn. And I think that works the same with something like technology. You can live in a space where you're like, well, I don't have any, so therefore I'm not doing anything. Or you could say, I'm going to use what I have. And when opportunities come around, I'm going to try and be better.
Mm-hmm.
Little anecdotal advice. That's kind of the best I got with that.
No, I think that's great. And I think the good news about history is that like it's not technology dependent, right? I mean, yeah, you're in grad school now, and when I was in school, it was like, yeah, it's books and it's paper, and like that's what it is, and that's still I think what it's always going to be. And so there are tons of fancy tools, and I think there are fun ways to use technology, like we were saying at the very beginning, with like spicing up lessons, right? Where you say, oh, document analysis. Well, this time it's going to be a document web quest, or this time you're going to take a document and then you're going to go online and you're going to make some sort of visual representation and post it on Padlet and we're all going to look. Like that's all great, but ultimately at the end of the day, you're still doing that same thing. You're still reading and you're writing.
Digging through old sources.
Exactly. So I can put Hammurabi's code online. But it's still Hammurabi's code. So I think if you're a teacher that's feeling stressed that they're not using enough technology, that's probably not true. If you are using a lot of technology, that's fantastic. And I would guess that probably you're still doing the same basic stuff that other people are doing on pen and paper. Exactly. You're just doing it in a way that maybe the kids find a little more jazzy and exciting, which is good. So
yeah.
So yeah, we'll end with you already mentioned a few, but our favorite resources for teachers. For me, in terms of free resources, World History for Us All. I think it's out of Stanford. It is just it's one of those websites where you go and it's just words, so it's not the most like user friendly to navigate. But they have tons of lessons that go all the way back to like prehistory to today. And what I like is they have full like unit plans, which I always love, where it'll say like, and here's the teacher version, and here's the kids worksheet, and here are the questions already.
Is it attached to Shag, Emily, or is it something different than Shag?
Attached to what?
Shag's, the Stanford.
Oh, I don't know.
Okay.
I think it's Stanford. I might have said the wrong school, but it's called World History for Us All. You just go to that, just Google that. It's either .com or .org, and they have tons. And that's where it's, it's not perfect. You wouldn't follow along with that all year, but if you find a lesson from them that you like, it's normally fully formed. And then in that same vein, but you have to pay for it, is the Choices program, which is out of Brown University, is fantastic. Yeah. You have to buy it. I think it's worth the money if your school has the money, but they also have full unit plans. And I like it because I used to teach a current events class, and they had whole unit plans on current events, which is so rare. So, and they have that for U.S., world geography, human geography. So if you find something from Choices, or if you can go to one of their trainings, you'll walk away with a bunch of unit plans. Those are really fantastic.
Yeah. I like, for free resources, I know I said this, I love your podcast. I think it's just really well done. I think it's accessible to students and teachers. So there are just so many podcasts, and of course I'll put yours on blast all the time because I love it. But Also free, and I'm not exactly sure when this podcast is coming out, but remember on August 1st, this elusive AP classroom is going to be accessible for teachers, and I guess they're rolling it out to students. So teachers tomorrow, or whenever you're listening to this on August 1st, College Board released this AP classroom where supposedly all of the resources we need are going to be housed. That's one of just a time-consuming thing for a teacher to go through documents to try and put something together. So look for that free resource. Podcasts. I love the Khan Academy and John Green. There's lots of videos that you can use that I think can get students involved. We buy the DBQ project. I don't necessarily think the essays or the prompts are crafted in I think they're a little less difficult than what they'd see, but there's still so many resources, and they have a lot of good ideas. They set up a little context. So if you can get the DBQ project. And lastly, our district also buys a SHMOOP. It's SHMOOP, and it's an interactive website. It's also for the SAT and the ACT as well. So students get on there. I can see how many, when they've been on, how long they've spent there. They can dig deeper into like sort of anchored points and say, wow, you really missed social more. So there are lots of things out there.
Cool. And it sounds like in the ideal world, that's what that AP classroom is going to be. I know all the students will get an account and they'll be able to do like checkpoints and say like, okay, did I really understand this key concept or not? I would think they're going to be registered in my class. So I'd think I'll be able to go and see, oh, wait, you haven't logged in at all year. So so for those kids who are like, I have an 89.4, can you do anything for me? I might honestly just log into AP Classroom and be like, well, let's see. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot out there. The last little thing I'll say is to all the teachers out there who are incredibly smart and love history and love creating your own lessons. I know my first year or two felt like I was like too good for the little freebie lessons that the College Board was giving. I was like, I know this. I can make my own. It's going to be great. And then about 2 or 3 years in, I actually went in and like watched a lot of those videos on College Board and like used some of those lessons. I was like, oh, dang it, they're actually pretty good, especially if you're just looking for some kind of like intro activities to do for certain units. So yeah, don't be afraid to just go. I mean, the College Board it's so hard to navigate, but once you can find it, it has really some good resources, and they have, master teachers giving their lessons that they use. Yeah. And so I was kind of bummed that I found out about that too late. I think at first I thought, oh, I don't need any of that. I don't need that help. I'll make it myself. And then that was really stupid. So
yeah. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, as they say. There are resources out there, but I really believe this, the kids that are sitting in front of you, and that's what you really need to focus on, and use social media. It's not all evil. There are people, that's how we met, right? So there are things that you can use, curate your life so that you're absorbing that stuff to give to your kids.
Yeah, definitely. And with that, you can follow both of us on social media because we both post a lot of things. I just posted like an hour ago, I made like a 20-minute YouTube video going over all of Unit 0 for WHAP. So I covered like 10,000 years of history in 20 minutes. It's insane. It took me a really long time. I thought it was going to be super easy to just put pictures on there, and it took me forever.
I don't know how you do it.
Oh my God.
You're my shero. How do you do? You have a little one, you're the podcast, you have this, that, and I'm just like, man, Granny can't get with it.
It took me forever. But so, yeah, follow us on Instagram. So I'm at Anti-Social Studies. You're at History Heals Teach, right? Mm-hmm. And because we post stuff a lot, and we also will share things that other people post that's really good. And yeah, thank you so much, Erin, for joining me today. And thanks to everyone who stuck it out through this whole almost like hour-long conversation. I hope it was helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Emily. And I'll be talking to you soon.
Okay, cool. Bye.
Bye.